June, it'll be 3 years since I decided to start streaming on Twitch. That's crazy. 3 fucking years? That's insane. I was thinking about like what games I've played so far. What are some of my favorite memories, favorite game types to play? And I love a good deep storyline, a deep game that really pulls you in. And it's almost like reading a book, right? Like you guys come in, you check out the stream 2 nights a week, or 1 or 2 nights a week, or three days a week sometimes. Like last week we did 3 times. Actually, I did 4 streams, didn't I? Yeah, I did Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I did 4 streams last week. But I digress. But I was thinking about that, like when we have a game that takes me like 30 hours to play through. Like think of some of those bigger RPGs that I played: Shining in the Darkness, Dragon Slayer, Legend of Heroes, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Those bigger games that take a while. Valhalla, the futuristic bartender cyberpunk adventure simulator. Those kind of games take a long time and a lot of investment of time, and it's almost like reading a book. Like we're in a book club. Like we get together, we hang out, one guy sits and reads the book, or you guys watch one person play the game, and it's like this big, deep, enthralling like adventure. And it gets people in the chat excited. It's like, oh man, this is gonna be like reading a good book or watching a good movie series or a TV series or something like that. And so then like everyone kind of comes together and just keeps it going, right? Like the chat's interested in the game. Oh, we're doing a hot topic. Oh my, we're doing a hot topic. Well, I'm doing my own hot topic. World's End hot take, please. World's End. I didn't watch World's End. I watched Wrestle Kingdom. I'll get to Wrestle Kingdom in a moment. But I was thinking about like the games that I stream. What are my favorite types of games? Those games that are more involved and more deep, that it take me a while. That it's like, oh, yep, playing more Shining in the Darkness. Yep, taking more, playing more Shining in the Darkness or Final Fantasy Mystic Quest or whatever. And I was thinking about what types of games am I qualified to talk about? I think the games that I'm qualified to talk about are games that I've played through. And in the last 3 years, I've played through 2 genres in general that I like the most. I love just about everything. One genre that I have hardly even touched on since I started this stream is fighting games, and I love fighting games. So I think I need to be playing more fighting games. That's one thing I want to do this coming year. But I also want to use fighting games as a way to like kind of let's play a fighting game for like a half an hour before we get into a big storyline, or before we play a game, or in between game nights when it's like not really, I'm not in the mood necessarily to play like real deep games or something like that. So here's my hot take on a couple games that I played through that I consider longer-ish, action adventure RPGs. So I played through, I think, 4 action adventure RPGs since I started this stream. On the TurboGrafx, I played through Dungeon Explorer 2, played through Eastbook 1, and Neutopia 2. Those are 3 that I played through. Then I played through Soul Blazer on the Super Nintendo and Magic Knight Rayearth on the Saturn. That's 5. I think that's it. You could kind of consider Infernax an action-adventure RPG, but it's a side-scrolling one. So it's kind of set up more like a Castlevania 2 or a Zelda 2, that kind of style. Maybe that could be thrown in, but Infernax was a lot of fun, too. Maybe that's more of a Metroidvania, that Metroid-style game. I hate the term Metroidvania, but you know what I mean when I say Metroidvania. But, like, I was thinking about that, like action-adventure RPGs, and I have not played through any Zelda games since the start of this stream. So I've been thinking about, like, what kind of game would be the next one to play. An action-adventure RPG, a traditional turn-based RPG, like a Final Fantasy, like a Chrono Trigger. So, like, I have polls up. We've put some on Twitter. I always have that question that Nightbot pops up over here in the chat where he's like, hey, what game do you guys want to see next? Why don't you guys give me your vote on what you want to see next or whatever? And it's like, oh, well, I don't want to see any of these games, or I want to see Vegas Stakes, and the chat was kind of talking about Vegas Stakes earlier this week. So boom, we played Vegas Stakes. But I'm thinking this coming year, before I get to my hot take on those kind of games, I think this coming year I want to try to knock out some of the heavy hitters. I think I'm going to tackle Chrono Trigger. I think I'm going to tackle Sea of Stars was one I was playing for a while, and so was Paladin's Quest, and so was Dead of Brain. Those are games I swear to you I'm going to get. I just saw a playthrough of Chrono Trigger. It was a fun one. Dude knows the game by heart, though. Do you have that level of knowledge of it? No, I've never played through Chrono Trigger, period. Ever. One of the guys that was a big follower of this channel for a while, Ring Fit Runner, is a huge Chrono Trigger fan. They call him Chrono Trigger, whatever you want to call it. I don't have a lot of experience with Chrono Trigger. I've played it and started it probably 3 or 4 times. gotten 5 to 10 hours into it and then just don't keep it going. So my options were like Final Fantasy 2 or 3, which of course is Final Fantasy 4 and 6 in Japan, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, or Earthbound. Those are 5 big ones that I'd love to get into at some point. Those are all turn-based RPGs as well. Yes. Wait, no, are they? Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 2, 3, Earthbound. What was the other one? I said something else in there. Oh, Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana is an action adventure RPG. So that would be in the other. Yeah, I think Earthbound might be it too. I've been thinking a lot about Earthbound. So then there's the action RPG element. So then you got like Zelda Link to the Past. Original Zelda could be one of them. I've got the Switch. I could hook that up and play those types of more advanced Zelda style games like Ocarina of Time. A few other type of games. I could play Neutopia 1. We could play Eastbook 2, which we didn't even start playing. We played Eastbook 1, but we never got into 2. 2 is like 4 times the size of 1, though, so it would take a good chunk of time. I think another 10 to 15 hours. There's a ton. There's a ton. There's like Crusader of Senti was on the Genesis. That's a good one. There's a ton of action adventure RPGs to play. So there's some thoughts there. East 4 is one that I really want to get into. But I'm thinking like maybe getting into some of these heavy hitters that everyone loves. Your Earthbounds, your Final Fantasies, your Chrono Triggers, Secret of Mana, stuff like that, like the big ones. Earthbound would be a great one. Earthbound would be a great one because it's kind of like this year also is the 25th anniversary of the first Earthbound, I believe. Mother 1 on the NES or Famicom in Japan. So there's a lot. There's 3 Earthbound games in total. NES, Super NES, and Game Boy Advance were the 3. So that would be fun. But here's what am I qualified to talk about? What am I talking about here when I talk about action adventure RPGs? Now let's think here. I played through Soul Blazer. I played through Dungeon Explorer 2. I played through Eastbook 1. Played through Neutopia 2 and Magic Knight Rayearth. And like each one of those games, now that's probably the most of any one single genre style of game that I played through. And if you consider Infernax, that Metroid style of open side-scrolling type action adventure. What are my thoughts on those games? If I had to rank them, could I even rank them? I'm not really sure. I think the lowest on the totem pole, though, and this is going to come across so weird, but I think the one that I enjoyed playing through the least was Magic Knight Rayearth. And here's why. Like, I know I gave a hot take after Magic Knight Rayearth, right after I played it. And I think I had some good and bad things to say about it. The good was the music's amazing. The graphics are incredible. The anime cutscenes are really great. There's a lot of really positive things about it, but it's all about, the presentation. It's all about the character development. It's all about the characters. Like, do you care about them? Yes. But what's the gameplay like? What's the challenge level like? What's the balance? Like, do you get fully immersed in the game? And you just don't. Anytime you start to get into a certain level or anytime you start to get into one of the specific dungeons in the game, you get pulled right back out of it because the levels are very short or extremely gimmicky. And I didn't care for that at all. I didn't like that. I don't remember any parts of the game, gameplay-wise, where I was like, oh, this is such a fucking kick-ass dungeon. Look at how cool this is. Look at how much fun I'm having. There isn't anything like that, especially in comparison to other games. I think then if I was going to go up the list one, I think Neutopia 2 would have been my 4th favorite out of those. Obviously, it's an unapologetic Zelda clone. It is just like the original Zelda mixed with Link to the Past a little bit. It's a fine game. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't do anything wrong. There's a few spots in it where it's a little overly ridiculous. Like most of the game is actually very easy to get through, and then they just pop the challenge level up through the roofs to try to like make the game more difficult. Instead of it actually balancingly like or gradually getting harder and harder, it's just all of a sudden it's fucking impossible at the end. And that I didn't like. I actually had to use a save spot. I had to use a save at the end because I could not keep going through the same dungeon and keep fighting the same boss over and over and over again. I was getting super frustrated. I remember at the end, I was getting mega frustrated, and then I just did a one single 30-minute stream of just me fighting the boss until I killed him because I was getting so fucking sick of playing that game. Yeah. So Neutopia 2 would be next. Then what do we have? We have Soul Blazer, Eastbook 1, and Dungeon Explorer 2. So then I think I would go with, oh, that's really hard. Those three. Infernax is really good too, by the way. Infernax I almost consider a different type of game, but Infernax is amazing and incredible, and it's such a good game. It brings all the nostalgia vibes of like Castlevania 2 without it being Castlevania 2 in any way. It's crazy. Dang it. I think if I had to choose between those three, Dungeon Explorer 2, East Book 1, and Soul Blazer, I think I'd have to say, I think I'd have to say Soul Blazer is my third favorite out of those three. And I really like Soul Blazer. I've been watching some Jason Graves videos lately. He made a top 100 Super Nintendo games of all time. And in his top 100, he did not include Soul Blazer. He actually said he disliked Soul Blazer. He does not enjoy the game. And I'm like, I don't understand. But he liked Illusion of Gaia and he liked Terra Nigma, which are considered the spiritual sequels to Soul Blazer, with much in similarities of the way of gameplay style, a lot of the similar style of dungeon creations, world building, et cetera, et cetera. But he didn't like Soul Blazer. And I never really got into why he didn't like Soul Blazer. I think I love Soul Blazer. I think it's really good. I remember enjoying the game quite a bit when I was younger. I never quite finished it. And then recently tackling it probably close to 2 years ago now. And I beat it on real hardware, which I was really stoked about. I fucking fell in love with it. Like I thought it was so well done, and such a great game. And if you follow my Twitch stream at all, you probably watched me play it. But if you didn't, follow the YouTube channel, which I know those links come up every once in a while, and Nightbot will pop those in there. But go to the YouTube channel and look up the whole playlist is up there. Anytime I do a Twitch stream, by the way, and it's a game, that almost every single time, I wouldn't say every single time, but anytime I do a Twitch stream and I got a game on it, I always upload those to YouTube later. So you can watch my YouTube videos a solid week after I stream them live. So that way you don't have to, if you miss my stream and you're like desperately in need of watching it every week, which I don't think anyone should, but if you do, you can always catch them on YouTube later. So that's just on my Game Huggers YouTube channel. So youtube.com/Game Huggers. Sorry, cheap plug. Cheap pop. But seriously, Soul Blazer is such a unique and fun action adventure RPG. It came out months after Link to the Past. A lot of people had played through Link to the Past. A lot of people loved Link to the Past. And Zelda was like the king. And that was the only Zelda game that came out on Super Nintendo. And then it came to bigger companies like Enix and Square. And, I think, didn't IREM make a action RPG on the Super Nintendo? I don't remember. There's a lot of really good ones, though. Secret of Mana being some of the Secret of Mana, Terra Nigma, Illusion of Gaia. Anyway, but Soul Blazer came out after Link to the Past, and it was such a unique, different style to the game where you are sort of recreating or refinding this world that had been lost and sucked into this like black evil abyss, and you go through dungeons and you unlock parts of the dungeon that unlock parts of the city. And in order to continue to see everything in the dungeons, you have to go into the city and meet people and stuff. And it's like the city initially just starts as this big empty area, and you fill it up with buildings and houses and libraries and bars and like all this stuff as you're going through the dungeon, unlocking these areas. It's super freaking cool. And I always had a blast with it. I thought the bosses were really fun. I love the music in that game. And I thought that just the presentation overall was really freaking good. And now having played through the rest of it, I can say it's excellent. And like, Jason Graves said that Illusion of Gaia and it's especially Terra Nigma. Terra Nigma is a fantastic action RPG, and I can't wait to get to that. I remember playing Illusion of Gaia though when I was younger, and I got lost in it because I wasn't really gripped and super interested in learning what the rest of the world was like. Soul Blazer was always super intriguing to me, and it made me want to play it, want to continue playing it. It had this very unique graphical style. It had that early Super Nintendo, early 16-bit era look to it, and I just love that because that's one of my favorite eras in gaming. Is that like 1989 to like 92 that like really started to grip pieces together and make it look like, whoa, this isn't Nintendo anymore. It's something new. This is the nerdiest rant I've heard all day. Okay, well, good. I'm glad. And then it comes to the top two. And the top two, I know what my top two is already, but just so you know, any one of these three top games could have been number one easily. Like that Soul Blazer rant, I love that game. But number two is probably one of the most unique and incredible experiences that I played when I was a kid. And having just recently replayed it again last year, Dungeon Explorer 2. And it has the most generic name ever. Dungeon Explorer, like good grief. But when the Turbo first came out in 1989, they would port directly from Japan games that had little to no need as far as English to Japanese knowledge. So like they would take like, oh, there's like 75 lines of Japanese in this game. Well, let's translate it to English and bring it to the US and whatever. And an action RPG is very difficult because there's going to be a lot of people you talk to and a lot of hints and tricks and things like that. But the game was called Dungeon Explorer. It came out, it was released around the launch on the Turbo. It was a really fun game. It's like if you like Gauntlet games, now think Gauntlet or Gauntlet Legends, where you have like gigantic, huge mazes with multiplayer up to 4 players, and you just go crazy, and you're going through these dungeons and these mazes, and you're beating up bad guys, and you fight a boss, and you're like, oh, that was fun. And you go back to the town and regroup or whatever. Well, Gauntlet had a lot of those fun elements, but Gauntlet was just mazes, period mazes. You just went through mazes together, and it was like you're running around. It's like Green Warrior needs food badly, and you put quarters into. And if you're playing the arcade version, you put quarters in to replenish your health and shit like that. And it's fun. It's a very fun game. Gauntlet is incredible. But Dungeon Explorer took it a step further by making it into an actual action RPG. So you got to think of the Zelda styles or Soul Blazer, Dragon Warrior, not Dragon Warrior, but Soul Blazer, Secret of Mana, Terranigma or whatever, Magic Knight Rayearth, where you have these dungeons you can go to, but you start off in a city and you're talking to these people and they're like, oh, the princess has been kidnapped. What do we do? And there's a bar, and then there's a fortune teller. Geez, that took me a long time to get to. I'm a little tired. I stayed up and watched Wrestle Kingdom last night. I've been up since 2 a.m. So that'll be my rant for Wrestle Kingdom. It adds an RPG element to the crazy huge dungeons. And now the part that goes a step further that I absolutely loved about Dungeon Explorer, and it's crazy that this game came out in 1993, because you think of these kind of games nowadays, people that play D&D, people that play MMOs or online action RPGs on online RPGs, World of Warcraft, Phantasy Star Online, Destiny, these kind of games that are really, really in depth, where you can play by yourself, go off and do these missions, power up your guy, beat bosses, do different areas, do raids, do quests, do all this extra stuff, and then your buddies and you are like, hey, Friday night, who wants to game? And you get together and you find 3 or 4 of your best friends, you all go into this game and you go kick ass with your guys that you've been fighting with solo missions for so long, and you get together. Dungeon Explorer 2 allowed you to do that in 1993. Now, you don't play online. Everything is considered co-op nowadays, so it's online multiplayer or couch co-op. But not even a LAN party, bro. In 93, you could save your game, continue building up your character, go through the game, blasting through the game, doing whatever you want to do, fight as many bosses as you want, go on missions, level up your guy like crazy, get him to a certain muscular, super awesome power. And then you can save your game, or you can request password. It gives you this gigantic grid full of all these letters and text and stuff. You take it all down. You take a picture of it with a camera. You write it all down on your pen and paper in your notebook. You bring it over to your buddy's house, which, of course, back in the day, who had a TurboGrafx? Nobody. So it was literally my one friend and I who had turbos in town. But in theory, if you had up to 5 people that had turbos, you could do this. You take down your password, you go to your friend's house, they start their game, you go to add players, and you go to add up to 5 different players. So you have all your friends come in, you hook up all 5 of your controllers to the turbo. It brings up a thing where you're multi-selecting your character. You can start a new game with a new character, you make a new character, pick a new character, I'm sorry. They don't actually have making characters, but you can pick characters. And then you put in your password. And if you put in your password, it'll continue from whatever humongous level you were at. And in the game, and no matter what items you have, level you are, stats, it's everything, all that elevated stats. And then everyone plays to whatever part of the game that the first player is at. So say you wanted to start a new game as player 1, and then you wanted your next 4 players to be all your beefed up buddies. You could do that thing where you basically have all of your friends carrying you through a game in a similar way when you first start playing a game, and you've got friends that have been playing it for years that want to like show you the game. They're like, we'll accompany you through, and whatever. So, holy shit, dude. That was crazy. So when I beat Dungeon Explorer 2 for the first time when I was a kid, it was with my nephew and my best friend, Matt. And we played through it 3 players. And they each played through it by themselves, separately, playing through 1-player mode. And then the 3 of us got together and I got to play through it and see all that. And it was like, this is crazy. Like, this is so far advanced into what games would become and what's just normal, common, gameplay nowadays, where someone's like, hey, you want to play a game with me? I've been playing it for 5 years. You should jump in, play World of Warcraft with me. And it's like, okay, I'll try it out. And then you get rated through with your buddies. It's so crazy. So you have one buddy who power levels and you get dupes of them. Yes, it's crazy. It's crazy. That was Dungeon Explorer 2. Lovely game. It's a little short, though. I think when I streamed it, I beat it in about 6 or 7 hours. So that's the only drawback to it. And in the Dungeon Explorer games, I believe overall there's been 4 of them. The first one was fun. The first one was cute and quirky. It was on the TurboGrafx. It was a blast. It's not as in-depth as what I was just explaining, but you can play it through it, 5 players simultaneously through it, like an action-adventure RPG. Dungeon Explorer 2 is the one with the save feature and the being able to put in your passwords and then like rock through the game. It has way more in-depth character development. It has cities that are more advanced. It has anime cutscenes. It has like everything. Dungeon Explorer 2 is one I played last year, and that's top of the line. That's one of my top 5 favorite Turbo games of all time. However, out of all the action adventure RPGs I played, the one I love the most, and it's probably still my favorite of all time, is East Book 1. Now, usually it's East Book 1 and 2. That's one single game on the Turbo CD. But I only played through the first one because that was like where my nostalgia is. The second one I've only played through once, but it was a long time ago. And it's like a way more difficult game, and I just wasn't ready to play through. Wait, I got another topic you could be an expert on. What about top video games you star in? Well, I never starred in any video game, but I am featured in one. It is not me in particular. It is a wrestler of mine. Quail Justice is in the Best of Backyard Wrestling video games on the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and I think Xbox. Actually, I don't know if it came out on the GameCube. It might have been just Xbox and PS2. But yeah, Quail Justice is in it. And so is Xavier Michaels and his opponent, then Ted Lyons. That's another story for another day, but way back in the day. But let me talk about East Book 1. East Book 1 is, the first one was the first book of East was the Ancient Land of East. It's spelled YS. So if you've ever seen a game series that has like a big Y and an S, it's not Y's, it's not E's. Well, some people say E's. But East is an incredibly great series. It's got 10 games out in it now, including a prequel and then I think a offshoot type game that was on the PSP. There's actually a bunch of remakes and other stuff like that. But I'm strictly talking about the very first one, and I'm specifically talking about the PC Engine port, which was the TurboGrafx CD port. It is the first ever action adventure RPG with CD audio. It's the first one with anime cutscenes. It's the first one with like serious, very deep character development where you're wandering through this dungeon and you find these caves or these like areas with like prison cells, and you finally like are able to unlock one of the cells with some kind of magical key, and the girl comes stepping out, and it's an anime cutscene of a girl who's talking to you. Now this is 1989 when this came out. Nothing had ever been seen like this before. And so when my small little brain, who had only ever played Nintendo and Super Nintendo and Genesis at the time, with the and I love chiptunes music. Don't get me wrong, I love that. But when I saw East Book 1, I'll say East Book 1 and 2 because as a complete story, it's fucking perfect. It's like a 15 to 20 hour game. But the first one is one I played through. It's just magnificent. It's got this gameplay style that's so different than anything else. It's called the bump and run physics. So here's where the part comes that usually it is the first anime waifu experience. That's true. It is usually this gameplay element of East Book 1 and 2 and 4. 1, 2, and 4 are the games that it uses it in. Everything else, they actually have more to it, an actual action button. But the original East games came out on the MSX and then the older Japanese NEC computers. And back in those days, when you made a computer game, you had the keyboard to, use for it, but they wanted specifically to use the game controller. And those old Atari-style controllers only had one button on them. So that would be for like magic use or bringing up a menu or whatever they used that one button for. Before a Nintendo controller, And so so the first anime, so they used bump and run physics where all you need to do is be holding towards your opponent, and it's almost like you have a lance, like you're stabbing something at it. as long as you're running towards an opponent, you would still get an attack in. You don't need to push an attack button. You don't need to, excuse me, you don't need to stop and swing your sword, or your character doesn't swing any weapon or anything. It just runs through them with the sword. It's bump and running. You're bumping through bad guys. And initially, I didn't care for it either. I thought, this is a very dumb mechanic. This is very disappointing. I want my actual sword play. I want Zelda style. I want, whatever. There's another game, another original old school computer game that also came out on the NES that's very similar to that, and it's called Hydelide. And Hydelide's generally pretty frowned upon in the usual gaming communities. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I enjoy Hydelide. I enjoy all of the Hydelides, especially Virtual Hydelide on the Saturn. I actually think it's a pretty cool game. I don't think there's anything wrong with the Virtual Hydelide. But the original Hydelide had bump and run physics as well. It didn't work very well. You actually did have to hold down a button to attack, but when you would attack, your character wouldn't swing a sword or anything. You just were able to hold it down and then run into bad guys, and you'd charge through them. That's what East does, except for you don't need to push a button. You just run around. So in what? Oh, okay. In the East games, the first 2 and 4, you just basically run into bad guys. So you're able to just hold a controller with one hand with your D-pad and run around and just go running through bad guys. And so when you're first thinking about it, no, it's not great. I would much rather have a sword and attack with things, but it makes the gameplay so much quicker. And it also adds this interesting element of strategy where like the combat becomes a part of the game in a very different, unique style of way. And once you get used to it, it's amazing. And fighting bosses like that is just crazy cool. And that experience, I wish I could experience East Book 1 again. I wish I could experience every moment of it where at first I picked up the controller and I'm like, this is stupid. And then I got through like the first dungeon area and I'm like, I'm hooked. Like I'm so hooked. I need to play more. I want to see different versions of this game. I want to play through multiple, and then the end dungeon is like 37 stories of a tower. And the dungeon's got so many different puzzles and confusing areas and, oh God, traps and booby traps and bad ends or dead ends and everything. It's just East Book 1. And the soundtrack's done by Yuzo Koshiro. And the graphics are really good. Anime cutscenes. It's wonderful. That's an A+ game in my opinion. It's just so good. So between all those games, I think I'd like to try to tackle another one. I think I'd either like to do an action adventure RPG or a traditional RPG. Now, thank you. I'm glad. I'm gonna have to save that one and then 5 out of 7. Perfect.